That's our cue. All right.
It was supposed to go that way.
That's all right. We'll call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. First item on the agenda is roll call.
Darren Moran, Chris Zellner,
Here.
Joe Zisselsberger,
Here.
Kristen Runge,
Here.
Nyla Fry,
Here.
Jack Heineman,
Here.
Sam Kaufman.
Here.
Next item is confirmation of open meeting compliance.
I can confirm that the draft agenda was published in the Waunakee Tribune on 6/13. The final agenda was posted in all 3 official posting locations on 6/12, and the final agenda and packet were made available online on 6/12. For the audience, please be sure you've signed in with your name, address, and municipality for accurate record keeping. And anybody interested in participating in public comment or public hearing, please fill out the form and hand it to me prior.
All right, next up is public comment. Any public comments?
I have no forms.
All right, anyone online?
I do see a couple of people online. For those, if you'd like to make a public comment, now would be the time to click raise hand.
And just to note for the record, Aaron Moran is here.
All right. All
I
right,
don't see any.
no public comment. Then let's move on to the consent agenda. Do we have anything we'd like pulled from the consent agenda? Not, do we have a motion?
Move approval.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next up is reports and announcements. First one is Senior Services Committee.
We are not meeting until Wednesday.
All right. Sustainable Waunakee Ad Hoc Committee.
It was a fairly short meeting, but we had a the meeting itself was long, short agenda. Had a presentation from Pelletary that was fantastic. There was a whole ton of information that I think a lot of us were excited to see. The other thing, we scheduled a meet and greet with some of the stakeholders. That's going to come up in October at the Village Center.
Awesome, thank you. Next up, Parks and Rec.
We had a very brief meeting in which we discussed 2 items which will be later on this agenda.
All right, we had Plan Commission, and Plan Commission did 2 things. We discussed ordinance 129-159, and I'm probably naming that wrong, but it has to do with the placement that's allowed for fences. We decided we needed to have more discussion and more information on that issue, and we'll be bringing it back at a future Plan Commission. We approved a cooler addition to Waunakee, and then our third item we didn't have quorum for, so we will be reviewing that, which is a CUP for 606 Reeve Avenue in July.
I think just for that Waunakee item, that's a cooler that's going to support a new business called Prem Meats,
Yeah.
which is kind of a
Yeah.
deli butcher
Yeah,
shop in there. That used to be the Rocky Rococo location.
excellent. Very excited about that. I have to go out to Spring Green to shop at Prem right now, so it'd be nice that they're closer. Forgive the personal comment there. Next up, Joint Plan Commission, that was canceled. Community Development Authority was canceled for lack of quorum. Waunakee Committee. We've got Waunakee coming up.
Yeah, main thing we were discussing was the Hometown Heroes portion of the event, which will start at 5:30, 5:25 we'll call it, and go till just after 6. We'll have flyover, recognition of all the hometown heroes, as well as a parachute drop of 5 parachuters. So between 5:30 and 6 is really when that's going to take place. We approved the Cirque du Sham portion of it, and which is a Cirque du Soleil kind of show that's going to be going on during. And volunteers, we're about 60% on our volunteers right now. So that's something that I'll put out there, is we need more volunteers, just like everybody else.
Excellent. So volunteering the day of can be as short as 2 hours. You can volunteer the whole day. It's a whole lot of fun. So if you are interested in joining us to volunteer, please sign up, and they can sign up on the website for that.
Yes.
All right.
One quick note, just as a reminder, if everybody just pulls their microphone just a little bit closer, like an inch or 2, that really does help with the in-room audio speaker system.
Okay. All right.
Thanks.
Just in case people didn't hear that, sign up on the website for Waunakee volunteering. Tourism Committee, do we have a report from Tourism Committee? Seeing none, do we have any other committees, boards, or commissions, or other announcements?
I'll just make a quick announcement. We had the shred event this year. It was the 4th year of it, and we collected a little over 3 tons of material. It was the largest one we've had yet.
Wow, 3 tons.
Yeah.
That's a lot of material. Oh, that's fantastic. All right. Any other announcements? Seeing none, let's open up and have our public hearing, in which we will discuss and take action to approve an update to park impact fees. And Sue, I believe you're going to present that. And then we'll open up the public hearing.
Perfect. So this is the annual review of our park impact fees. Renee and I tag team on this. I'm the theory, she's the numbers. The park impact fee is designed to be a calculation that takes into effect the amount of money that the village spends on park improvements throughout the village, divided by the population of the village. We come up with a per person fee, calculate that out by number of people per household. We've been working this process for probably close to 20 years now. This year's results of that calculation are in your packet. One thing that you might notice is that the fees are a bit higher. The increase is a bit more than it has been in the past, and that is directly related to the amount of money that we spent on Centennial Park last year, also a basketball court in Scenic Valley Park. And so the board has always taken the approach that we just trust the math. While you do have the ability to change that fee to whatever fee you are comfortable with, the board has always in the past, again, followed the math. For example, in 2024, the fee actually went down a bit, and that was the approved fee by the board. So what we are looking at is, get to the right page here. Single family unit in 2025, the impact fee will be $3,401.85. For multifamily units, it will be $2,313.26. And group quarters, which would be nursing homes, it could be student housing, could even be prisons. But in our situation, it's usually a nursing home, is $1,133.95.
All right, with that, is that all? Can we open up our public hearing now?
Yep.
All right, with that, let's open up the public hearing at 6:08 PM. Do we have anybody who would like to comment on the park impact fees for 2025?
I have no forms.
No forms? Okay.
Those online, click raise hand if you'd like to participate.
All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing at 6:09. And with that, commissioners, or trustees, excuse me, what questions do we have? Erin, can I start with you?
Yeah, we talked about this at the Parks and Rec Committee, and I think it's great. It's a bummer that it's going up this year. I know it did go down last year, and I think it's good that we're following the math on this one to keep it consistent.
Chris?
As Aaron mentioned, it was unanimously approved at Parks. The only question I have is for ADUs, where do those fall under this?
We have not had that conversation yet.
Yeah, we have not had that brought up at all. I mean, we definitely can check with our park impact fee advisors to see. But I would think, just like we added group quarters a couple of years ago, perhaps we would have to do another study and add a separate fee for ADUs. That's just my off the top of my head response.
Yeah, I do not know. That is a really good question, Chris. I do not know the answer to that.
For a single family home, Sue, is it just the same fee no matter how many bedrooms are there, or is it fee based on number of bedrooms?
So some communities do have fees that are based on bedrooms. Ours is just a residence. So it is single family, multifamily, and group quarters.
Yeah, I think we'd need to talk to the auditors to figure out exactly.
Thank
That's
you,
it.
Chris.
Thanks.
Joe?
The ADU question was, I think, a great one, so I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. I'm not thrilled with them going up, but what are we gonna do? I'll trust the math.
All right, Nyla?
I will trust the math, and I agree. That's a very good question, Chris, because one of the reasons we looked at ADUs was to increase density in the village. And when we increase density, we assume we're going to increase park usage. So it makes sense to look at that.
Jack?
So as a new board member, I'm just trying to figure out, this goes on our annual tax?
This
Or how
is
does
a
this,
one-time fee when am I getting that right, Sue? One-time fee when a unit is built.
Right.
So if you build a new home, you can pay the park impact fee, but after that, you no longer pay the park impact fee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Sam?
No questions.
All right. I don't have any questions myself either. Costs are going up and we will trust the math on this one. So with that, do we have a motion? Yeah. Mhm.
So when you look at multifamily units, and we're looking at kids in those multifamily units, or it seems that the multifamily should pay more than the residents if the usage, if there's more kids in the multifamily.
So it's per unit of multifamily.
Oh, okay.
So if you have like 100-unit apartment building, they're paying that per unit.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions? No, seeing none, do we have a motion?
I move to approve the resolution approving updated park impact fees.
I'll second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. All right, thank you very much, Sue. All right, next item on the agenda then is, let me get back to the right page here. Discuss and take action on awarding a contract to Parkitecture and Planning for Water Wheel Park Planning Project.
Here I am again.
There you go.
So this is a project that the village board approved funding for actually about a year and a half ago. Water Wheel Park is a vacant piece of land that was deeded to the village along Water Wheel Drive. We submitted, sent out an RFP for planning services to help the park committee and the village board decide what we would make of that 13-acre property. We were very pleased in the response. We received 9 responses from very qualified firms. A staff team narrowed that down to 3, and then we had Zoom interviews. Again, very qualified firms to choose from. Parkitecture and Planning is the firm that we brought forward to the park committee at their meeting last week to come on board and do that work for us. $20,000 was set aside in the budget, and Parkitecture and Planning's proposed fee is $14,460. You can see the notes in the board packet from each of the staff members that sat in on that review process about our recommendations for that firm. There is also the need for some wetland delineation work that's going to need to take place as a part of that project. So we're feeling really good about the fact that we have some funding left over in that budget to help cover those costs. We will come back to you with that contract. That work is not something that actually any of our 3 finalist firms could manage in-house. So we'll be back with that piece.
All right, so thank you. With that, let's start with questions. And Sam, can we start on your end today?
I don't have any questions. Park committee reviewed this. We approved it unanimously. Obviously, we've worked with Parkitecture before on our recent Playscape project, and I think they'll do an excellent job.
Excellent, thank you. Jack?
No questions.
Nyla?
No questions.
Joe?
Nothing.
Chris?
No questions.
And Aaron?
No questions.
All right, do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve a contract with Parkitecture and Planning for planning services for Water Wheel Park.
Second.
All right, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, thank you, Sue. All right, next up then is continued discussion regarding ordinance amendment to adjust the village board member terms.
We have one item before that.
Oh, we do have one item before that. Thank you. See, I'm not using my reading glasses now. Discuss and take action on a public participation plan for the comprehensive plan update pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 66.1001.
All right, I will take this one. Good evening. I'm Lauren Freeman, the new Deputy Administrator / Community Development Director. So tonight we are looking at the public participation plan for the comprehensive plan. So as you all know, we are updating the comprehensive plan this year. And as part of state statute, we are required to adopt a public participation plan. So the resolution tonight is just adopting that plan. And the plan is included in your agenda packet, and it was also kind of proposed in the proposal that the Lakota group provided when they submitted. So just going over it quickly, it highlights a number of engagement opportunities for the public to get involved. The first is the steering committee, which we've assigned to the Plan Commission to provide kind of that steering committee thoughtfulness and an impactful role in providing guidance towards the process. Additionally, and I think one of the most important items will be a project website and an online survey. This will be the best way to get the most people as possible engaged in this process. The survey is not out yet, but the survey we're going to be getting out to the whole community and reaching them in a number of ways to make sure that they're aware of it. Our hope is that people are hearing it in a number of different ways and maybe even get annoyed from hearing about it.
One clarification, Lauren, we are going to provide printed versions for people who don't have access.
Absolutely. The third item is the stakeholder focus groups. Those are actually occurring this Thursday, where we're meeting with a number of different groups to really focus on specific items. So you'll see in the list, we have a business owners group, we'll do a real estate professionals group, resident group, et cetera, to really just focus in on some subject matters that are going to help inform the rest of the community engagement process. And then finally, we'll have a number of community open houses, the first one being this Thursday from 6 to 8 at Prairie Elementary School. This will be the first of several engagement sessions, and this open house will also help us kind of tailor the survey to what are the kind of top issues that community members are thinking about and wanting to include in the comprehensive plan. So with that, I guess I'll also mention that, you know, this plan is specific enough to meet state statute, but also open enough that if there are other opportunities that we want to engage the public, we certainly can do that, which is really helpful to have that flexibility.
Thank you very much, Lauren. And for comments or questions, Nyla, can I start with you? You came to the Plan Commission and had some thoughts.
Yes, I do have some thoughts. First of all, the meeting that we're going to have this coming Thursday night, unfortunately, people don't know about it. That tells me that we aren't initially starting off meeting our goal of having people know what's going on. So that's one thing. I also want to verify that we will have the printed surveys and the web survey available in Spanish as well as English.
Yes,
thank you for
absolutely.
that. But one of the things that I heard from a few people is, we've talked about it at the Sustainable Waunakee Committee, is to put notices out in the utility bills so they have something to take out and see when meetings are going to occur. That's important because if we want people to be able to provide information, we need to let them know when the meetings are. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Nyla. And let's ping pong, Joe.
I would agree with what Nyla said. I'm a little bit concerned about the meeting this Thursday night. I don't know where we go with that because we have a very short time at this point, but other than that, I think I like what I see here. It's just a matter of approving and tweaking some of those advance notices.
All right, thanks, Joe. Jack.
Do we know when open house 1 is this Thursday, and open house 2, and open house 3, do we know when those dates are? Have those been scheduled, or? if
Those
we're
have
putting-
not been scheduled yet.
If we're putting a plan out, you would think that we'd be able to schedule those all at once so that there is some adequate notice of meetings coming up. And I echo with Joe and Nyla, you know, if you want people here on Thursday night and we're talking about it on Monday, how do we get those people, to the meeting?
Maybe to be clear, I believe open house 2 isn't going to be for another handful of months. So it's not like next week or next month. We're months out from having that next meeting. That'll be post survey collection and data analysis by the consultants.
Any other questions or comments, Jack?
No, that's fine.
All right, thanks. Chris?
So I'd echo what everybody is saying. I'm a person that looks at how do we have a solution to the issue, and getting people to respond is generally difficult. But is there a system, and I'm not even saying this, but robocall that we could engage in to let people know of these, that you're leaving messages? You just have a company that's doing that during elections. That seems to be a real popular thing that takes place. Some people get annoyed. I'm not saying we're going to annoy people, but I think that we could at least get the message out there that these are taking place. The fact that nobody knows about this happening on Thursday isn't a positive thing, but I think we have an opportunity right now. To Nyla's point of the utility bill would be a great spot. In the fall, it would be a great opportunity with kids coming back, maybe with the school district, a partner with the school district, because this is very important to them as well, to get information going home with the kids. So there's solutions that we can have. We're just kind of behind the ball here on this first meeting, I think.
All right, Sam?
I agree with what everybody else stated, as it was stated by a speaker who's here, who was at one of our previous meetings, everyone has an address, and it's important that we take advantage of that. I would also strongly recommend, presuming it'll be done anyway, that those who do attend the meeting, that email addresses are collected so they will have some form of notification of the next meeting that happens, because if they come to the first meeting, well, then we'd also like them to be able to see the draft of what they worked on at that first meeting.
Thank you, Sam. Aaron?
Yeah, I think I'm curious if I'm getting this right. So the one on Thursday is where everyone's invited, or had we invited specific groups to this one?
So it's kind of a full day. So during the day, we have about 8 focus groups that we're holding throughout the day. And we did targeted invites to those to get a really focused discussion. And then the evening portion is just open to the public. So anyone who would like to attend.
And does someone, and you might not have the answer, but does someone have to be there for the full time, or is it come and go? I saw it said they have exhibits and activities at these.
Yes, I believe it's come and go.
Okay.
Yep.
And maybe if we're advertising that, people will drop in after the community band concert or whatnot, but. And that's on, sorry, I'm gonna say then we also have a few days, the 7 of us should be telling people that we think in the community should go, just using that, I think is helpful. And I encourage anyone watching to tell their friends, I don't necessarily think we need to move it. It's hard to get people in the summer to get anywhere, but
So a couple of questions for the focus groups during the day. Do we have RSVPs, and how are those going?
Yes, we have RSVPs and we have really great response rates. So I think we'll have really great discussions for all of the focus groups.
Have we been advertising the one at night, the open one, and how have we been doing that?
Yes, yeah, mostly through Facebook and our website. Unfortunately, I don't want to throw our consultant under the bus, but we did get some of the marketing materials a little bit late. And so that's partially why haven't had as much time to advertise this one. But I do want to say that this one will be less important than the future ones, especially the survey. I think that's where we really want to spend our money getting it out, using the utility bills, things like that, because that's going to be much more approachable for people to provide input. They can just do it from their home on their computer, or they could stop in and fill something out. So I really would love your help in getting the word out for these upcoming opportunities, and especially that survey.
Definitely do it. Yes, yeah.
Hey, I have a question. Who is invited to what's going on during the day on Thursday? Who are the people invited to that?
So each focus group has a specific kind of subject. So one is business and commerce. So we put together a list of people in the community who we thought would best represent those ideas and did targeted invites to those. So I have the full list of people if you're interested in seeing that, Nyla, but
Yes, I am interested in seeing that. Thank
Okay.
you.
Chris? No? All right. Do we have a web page dedicated? I should know this, but I also know what's going on from behind the scenes, so I wouldn't look on.
yes, we do. It's
Steady.
Waunakee2040.com.
Cool.
And I will say, I think we've seen such a rise in engagement and Kaylin's doing an amazing job. And I think
Mhm.
people are more likely, this is not something that maybe would necessarily pique someone's interest in the sea of online things or in summer fun outdoor events. But I think people are actually like really tuned into the village socials right now. And so I hope that something like this actually, because of all that prior work, will get more of a impact.
I hope so too. One of my concerns would be though, if we're only advertising it primarily through Facebook
Yeah,
for those that
no,
aren't
I
on
understand,
Facebook.
yeah.
Be anybody like really young, and, you know, people my age, middle age, 50 somethings are on Facebook, but I don't know that many other people are.
Or older than that too.
And older than that too. Yeah. Yeah. Chris?
I'm just gonna make the motion to approve the resolution adopting the public participation plan for the comprehensive plan update pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 66.1001.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion?
Yeah, well, I just want to note that Waunakee2040.com doesn't appear to come up yet. So,
Yep, I was just about to say the same thing.
yeah.
Do you know what the schedule is? That's another project our consultant is working on.
It was supposed to be live, so I will check in with him.
All right. All right. Any further discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item on the agenda then, let me go back here, is to discuss a continued discussion regarding ordinance amendment to adjust village board member terms. Was that to you, Todd?
Well, it's mostly to you guys.
Right.
I would, obviously, this is as clear a policy issue for your board to determine, and we will follow your lead on what you might wish for, which could be this evening to abandon further discussion, ask further questions to bring it back again, or to instruct staff and the village attorney to craft an ordinance draft that could put into motion the process to make it change. So we're looking for that direction from you. Based on the discussion it was a couple months ago, maybe, we did do some research. I pulled some language that was included in your packet that references both our current ordinance, a sample of probably what I found as to be the most unique village ordinance that approached terms a little bit differently, that being Menominee Falls. And then I also included the entirety of the state code relating to the establishment of villages and village government as it exists in statutes. I thought that might be useful to have in reference for who knows when, but specifically I noted the sections related to terms that are, I would call it the default terms for village governance in Wisconsin, which I would say is by far the typical approach that communities have taken, probably because of the state design. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Brian, and I and staff are able to answer questions as best we can.
All right, and Joe, you were the one that originally put this on the agenda, so
I
did you
was.
lead discussion?
Absolutely. I don't really have a whole lot of additional to say about this. I am intrigued by the Menominee Falls approach to this, mainly because it does create 3-year terms across the board for everyone. And it solves the problem that we currently have where every other year you end up with potentially more than 50% of the board changing over. So I guess with that, I'll just look for anybody to, share how you feel about that, share what you think in general. Maybe we start at the end.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I appreciate that we're having this discussion. I do think it's an important discussion that we have, that all of us in some degree, I think in some ways have mulled over at some point over the years. But a lot of people reached out to me, perhaps some of you, and I did not hear a single person who was in favor of changing anything. there was pretty swift opposition to just changing any sort of how we operate right now. So for that reason, I don't think we should do anything.
Can we dig a little more into that? I'm curious if they gave any feedback as to why.
It was just they like the things that they like the way that it is now.
Okay, that's fair. Jack, anything?
Yeah, I'd be in favor of moving this to a 3-year term. And, I know I've read some of the stuff online, which wasn't real complimentary. And there is no agenda to this. But I think to your point, if you get every 3 years, you're basically get two to three people that are running. What you proposed initially was 3 years for the trustees and then 2 years for the village president. And what that does is it puts the village president on a different cycle, which if one of the board members wanted to, pursue the village president, they could potentially do that. You can argue one way or the other on keeping things status quo, but it does cost. If you're talking about bringing new people in or people running for office, there is a cost. And myself, I've self-funded my campaigns, and I've run a handful of them. And the reason I do that is so that I'm not beholden to anybody. It's what's good for the community. So I would be in favor of 3-year terms for the village trustee.
Okay, thank you. Nyla?
Okay, when you presented this, I was very much in favor of it. It would make life easier for trustees as far as running campaigns, as far as being able to focus with a 3 years term, you'd be able to focus on issues longer. But then I heard from voters. I didn't hear from a single voter who wanted to change it. And you asked about some of the reasons people don't want it changed. There's concern about getting a trustee on the board that people absolutely don't want and being stuck with them for 3 years. There's the idea that you can have something happen and people's memories are short and that they will forget some of the negatives by the time the 3rd year rolls around. And they don't like the possibility that their voice is not going to be heard as often through a vote. And I also detected a trust issue. They like the system the way it is, but it's not just because it's always been the way it is. It's because they can't or they won't, and they don't want to put their trust into 3-year terms. So that's what I heard.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I like the idea that the year that you elect the president, you're not electing trustees, which is what I'm reading here. I think it's going to make for a more competitive race amongst the people who are qualified and have experience. I think it's just going to altogether result in a more competitive, better race and a way of lifting up talent. So
Appreciate it.
So I have one section highlighted in here that as I was going through this and thinking about it, and that's that the most common way that villages operate is what we have right now. And I think the 2 years is a really good thing because it gives people an opportunity this body to be held every 2 years, to go to talk to people and get feedback from folks. They're more willing to give that feedback during the elections. Generally, it's, I don't want to say crickets, but you don't hear that much from people overall. And every 2 years, I think the argument that would be made for 3 years could be for new board members getting used to the flow. But on the flip side of that, if they're coming to this body, they should be ready and prepared with the topics and versed in them. They're not going to know maybe all the intricacies right away, but they're going to pick up on it pretty quick. That's what we're here to do, is learn, listen, and act on the different things. Changing, there's always going to be change with anything we do. We're going to have change that takes place. And that's okay. Sam, your point where people just don't want to see change, there's going to be change. And most people don't like change as it's going on, especially the changes that we've had over the last several years. We're going into that different time frame of growth that we've had, that some people miss the old town feel of the little town or little village. And with our growth, we're not a little village anymore. I don't know the exact number, but I think we're in the top 5 villages right now, size-wise. So I don't see us needing to make a change. I think the change would be appropriate if and when the discussion happens that we're going to become a city, if that happens. That would seem to make more sense to me at that time to do something.
And that changes a whole lot of things,
Correct.
obviously. So
Correct.
perfect. Okay, Erin?
I don't have any strong opinions right now, but I do have questions. I must have missed when we talked about this last and didn't realize, I guess, not necessarily that, I didn't realize I hadn't heard anyone tell me about it beyond like them listening in on. Did not see anything online, so I understand that, yeah, change is different. I'm curious what doing like 3-year terms, but then 2 trustees every 3 years. And then that still would give 4 trustees the opportunity to not be on the ballot while the president's on the ballot, which is more than it is now. But people can run for both, right? Okay, so it's not like they don't have that ability right now. It's just, I mean, it's an awkward thing and obviously uncertain. So I guess this makes me very curious. I think the learning curve behind something like this really puts the 3 years on the positive side for me. I think if you have someone that's willing to put themselves out there, run, be serving the village in this way, I don't think an extra year is terrible. And it's almost like it's more comforting. Like they're really going to be committing. You'd think for the longer the term, there's almost this like further level of commitment that I think negates any sense of like, maybe we wouldn't get a board we liked. I think if anything, you'd almost get a board that maybe would be more representative of the village. We've had very contested elections the last 8 years, so I have a hard time being totally sold on like, we wouldn't be represented by people we like. I mean, if anything, maybe if there's someone that's really not representative of the village or, well, there's more ways to get involved because there's more seats up. Like, I just think it could be a great way. I think if we're going to look at where we're going as we grow, it'll be an interesting conversation to do. Are we doing, or we're representing specific areas of the village, or as many cities, places do. So I just don't think I'm like super opposed to this right now. I know I'm kind of rambling, but I think it's just making me way more curious versus like absolutely not, or absolutely yes. So I don't know. I think having an election where it's just the president might be interesting. I also wonder if that would put more of this like divisive political pressure on that role rather than it being something that less turnover there. There's a lot of influence in that role, and I think even having more board members that aren't up for election at the same time might be a good in between of that. Not that someone that's brand new can't be an excellent village president. I just think we're almost giving people more opportunities to stay involved and commit in different ways. So I don't know, I'm very curious and would love to hear what people have to think.
Excellent. Thank you. As far as my own perspective on this, I waver a lot. I think the 2-year plan that we've got isn't necessarily a bad thing. Could some variation of the 3-year plan perhaps improve it? It could. Could that also be a negative? It could. We don't know. Based on what I heard from this group, it sounds like we're about 50-50, give or take. I'm not feeling that that's a strong enough interest in moving forward with it any further than we have, unless there's any further comments about that.
Is this something that we could take a look at as we go through the comprehensive plan to get some feedback? Because obviously we all have different constituent groups and, you know, it'd be interesting to hear from the community, you know, on that. I don't know if that's a possibility.
I'm trying to call it up right now. I mean,
There's
you
there's
can,
elements, there's state,
yeah. you go
yeah,
ahead.
there's state stipulated elements required to strategic plan completion. Local governance structure isn't one of them. It doesn't mean that it's a good opportunity to engage our community in sort of at will conversations to gather information. Just not, it probably would be an awkward question intermixed with the type of questions that would be expected in the survey for this purpose. But depending on how strongly the board feels about it, we can probably figure out a way to try to ask the question somehow as we have community engagement in the process.
Would there potentially be value, and I don't know if this body supports it or not, but is it something where we could investigate the potential of transitioning to a city versus a village? And I don't know if there's interest in that or not. Maybe that's what we could find out through this as well.
So Brian did a little more. So you're relating both the question about board governance as well as city versus village structure and
Yeah.
how they can be incorporated into the.
Well, and yeah, basically from what Chris said, you know, obviously if we become a city, a whole lot of things change. And those terms are basically out the window. I mean, there's that much that changes with it. So is there an interest in becoming a city or is there not?
So terms for alders are 2 years too, just so that you're aware for cities.
But could be changed if.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, absolutely gather more information if you want to as a board. It's not one of the elements that are for the comprehensive plan. So I would, if you're going to kind of do it, you're going to have to make sure that you make clear to everyone that this is separate and distinct from the comprehensive plan analysis, because I think as you're going through the comp plan, you want to stick to what the elements that are in the statutes. So I think it would be difficult to gather the information as part of that process, but certainly, the question that you've raised, Joe, I want to say about every 7 to 10 years, the village kind of looks at that issue. And I know there's at least 2 times that I've been asked to look into it for the village, and each time, we do, and then the village looks at it and says, nah, not time. But, every year the village continues to grow. And so just because 20 years ago or 10 years ago, the village did not decide to go in that direction doesn't mean that 5 years from now or 10 years from now, the village isn't going to decide to do that. So I think it's always something you want to keep on the front burner. And yeah, as you go through that, there are certainly differences. And if the Waunakee wanted to become a city, you always have the ability that when that happens to do a charter ordinance that's also going to change, terms and things of that nature.
Absolutely. I think I kind of know the answer to this. If we were interested in pursuing becoming a city, and I in no way want to say that we are or are not, but I assume that would have a significant impact on where we go with the comprehensive plan.
I'm not a planner, but I actually think that might not be the case.
I wouldn't expect that to be the case either. In fact, in my experience, state law over time has kind of been watered down to really start to make the difference between city and village as far as growth is concerned to be relatively minor in difference between one and the other. I'm not sure, Lauren, if you have a thought on that, or Jared has been a village administrator as well, but it seems like that line has been really blurred.
And that's generally correct. I mean, the last village in this state to directly become a city, other than there was a very small one in the northern part of the state that did it because of a state law reason for a paper mill, was in 1977, and that was Verona, in part because I believe they wanted to fend off Madison, something like that. You used to see it more specifically because of the way the state laws were written. Now, because they've been watered down, there's not as much of, as Todd said, that distinction anymore.
It ends up being more like what's in a name. And does the notion of city versus village do something different to our cultural placement within the region? Do we think it might affect our ability to attract residents or economy or industry? I personally think that'd be a stretch for a name to make that sort of difference, but that's probably the biggest basis that I've noticed.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
I understand, the thinking of considering moving to a city, but when I look at all the irons we have in the fire right now, I just think we need to focus our priorities on the things, the fire district, what's going on with, Westport. We just have, we can only handle so much. And my priority right now is to get through those things, to mold what's in the fire rather than putting more in the fire and just having so much that we can't do anything in the best way possible.
Thank you for saying that. I was just feeling the same thing, like, yeah, it's not the right time for it.
But I would echo what I said earlier, that I do appreciate that we had this discussion. I think it was an important discussion to have. And I also think if you were to do anything involving a city, the first question people are going to ask you is why? And you need a clear and compelling reason to be able to do that. And I don't necessarily think right now we have that clear and compelling reason to have that move forward.
One thing that's sparking my curiosity in the state statute, section 4 under 6120 says any village may by ordinance change the number of trustees, but it shall not affect the term of office of trustees elected prior. And obviously there's a lot of other things in here, but I'm curious if there are villages with higher populations that would have more representation, which may, because I think one, from what I've casually researched, the difference between city and village being that we're representing everyone. We're not elected by location. And so I think it is an important thing to consider as we grow and as grow anyway size, but also we're sprawling out. And I think that's just like also an environmental thing, is having people having a say of choices, especially economically or industry, where things are going to be, because there's just so many impacts of environmental justice in situations like that where they don't have representation of where they live. So
I think I've often thought that we should talk about adding another trustee just for the committee burden that we each bear. Most of us have something every single week of the month. And when there are 5 weeks in a month, we now have, because fire board is the last, even in 5 weeks out of the month, you don't get a week off. And that gets to be, it's a lot of work. It's great. We're all honored to do it, but a week off because we had an extra trustee that was also participating doesn't just increase the voice, but it also allows us to concentrate on things a little bit better by lightening our load. So maybe that's another discussion.
I'm thinking it would have to be 2 and not 1.
Oh yeah, that's
Agreed.
even. Yeah.
And I would also say, if you look at some of the other municipalities around here, our committee burden is significantly less than just about anybody else in this county. If you talk to local elected officials, they have twice, in some cases, triple the burden that we do. So in many ways, we're actually fortunate that we have what we have.
Somehow I ended up with all of mine, but one in the first week of the month
Oh, wow.
this year. And so,
Get the other 3 weeks off.
but definitely, yeah.
Chris?
I just want,
Sorry, You're running the
Oh,
discussion.
no, no,
but-
it's fine. Is it
Oh,
okay?
it's fine.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to say, I did not advocate to have us become a city right now. That
No, no.
where our focus kind of went that way. That wasn't the intent. It was more really focused at whether we want to look at changing this. And I would say that our community has governed itself for a long time under this. And I'm biased and I hope all of you are as well, but I think we have a pretty darn good community that the people before us all set up, that we are steering a ship that is a good ship. And our growth has been good. I don't know that we need to make a change right now, to Nyla's point there. Timing probably is not the right time. Just like the city conversation's not, we'd have to go into, we're gonna have a weak mayor, we're gonna have a strong mayor. We can go down the whole list of, what a city would look like. That's not what our intent is right now, I don't think. And I just want to make sure I was clear that that's not what I was advocating for everybody. Just something that we could think about.
Totally agreed. So what I'm feeling is now is not the time.
With all this though, is there a time we want to say, let's check in on the fall, like put this on every June for future boards? I don't know. I don't want it to just
Maybe, yeah,
fall off
check
and
in.
never,
Yeah, so like 6 months
Be
might be
close
too
to the
soon, but an
fire.
April check-in would
Yeah.
be good. Yeah.
And I think it certainly would not hurt. Just ask people about
Yeah.
this when you said, what do you think about this?
Mhm.
Because some of us got more feedback than others. And, the whole thing with our irons in the fire, asking people is not necessarily creating action. So
So one more thing, if I might, Brian, is this something we could put on, is this something that we could put on an election where the people talk about this? They make a vote. Does that make sense to have them?
We'd-
Because I
we'd
view
have
this
to-
as similar to when we're talking about, should we have a pay increase for ourselves? That's an uncomfortable conversation always.
I think we'd have to look at that at staff level and see how or why that, I mean, essentially you're asking about an advisory referendum question, and I think we'd have to look into it further.
And I think also, and Brian may know this, the shared revenue bill that was passed significantly limited our ability to ask advisory referendum questions like that.
Yeah, this would probably be, I mean, the intent, I would say, I'm going to talk about the spirit of that
Yeah.
change. That was more, I think that was in reaction to certain referendums or other actions that local municipalities were taking that maybe were well outside of their jurisdictional powers to really impact. Whereas everything that you all have been discussing as part of this conversation is clearly within your authority. And therefore, I mean, it in part, whenever you have an advisory referendum question, though, you always want to have clarity on what yes or no means to the answer. And sometimes that's the most difficult part, is actually creating that question so that you can get to that clarity. And so I think that's one of the reasons why you'd want us to look at it at a staff level first. But the idea of having, one reconnecting on this issue a year from now and maybe having a little bit broad, I mean, I think the reason why we have the agenda item stated the way it is because this was specifically identified by the board to discuss it. You could theoretically have a broader agenda item that would just get into, village operations that would, cover, should we reach out to people and see if we should become a city? Should we reach out on the terms of the board members? And so having an agenda item makes sense. We would just want it to be a little bit broader, I think.
All right. So
And then the one thing to add to, I mean, I agree with the way that you're kind of wrapping this up. Anytime you adopt a charter ordinance, it takes 2/3 vote. And so I definitely think I heard at least 3 people as part of this very good discussion say at this point, I think they want to keep things the same. So that's probably why it makes sense.
absolutely. So, yeah, that's basically what I've heard as well. I think, roughly a year from now, a board operations item would probably be something good to have on the agenda.
All right. Thanks for bringing this up and putting it on the agenda, and thank you, staff, for looking into it and helping us in this discussion. Good discussion. Next two items on the agenda are possible closed session items. Brian, do we want to present them first and then make one motion or make?
I
sequential
think there's a
motions?
pretty good chance we will not need to go into closed session on the next item.
Okay. All right. So discuss and take action on proposed conveyance of lands to and from the village of Waunakee and the Durst family for property located near Woodland Drive and Mill Road intersection, including a mutual deed restriction that would apply to the lands. All right. And with that, Todd, is that you? That's you, Brian.
Brian's got it.
So this is starting on page 127 of your packet, and probably about this time last year, staff had approached the board on multiple, I would say, approvals and steps associated with a potential land swap with the Durst property. And then we had another meeting in October of last year where we discussed it, and essentially staff was directed, let's narrow the scope of this potential project to potentially just a trading of land between the Durst family and the village. And if you recall this, kind of the impetus for this is the fact that we do have a fence that is located on our property right now. And so one option for the village is just to say, all right, we want that fence to come down and we'll be done with it. This also potentially provides an opportunity for the village though, because, we've had some discussions already tonight about changes in state statutes. And I'm going to say 8 to 10 years ago, or maybe even more recently, the state modified its statutory eminent domain power for cities and villages, and we cannot condemn land for bike or pedestrian paths. And that's would essentially be the purpose for this land swap would be ultimately so that the village could get some land to, if it chooses to in the future, because if you do all this, you're not bound to put a path in there. You would just simply be acquiring land that if you chose to put a path in the future, you could do so. So as part of that, the last time that we were before you, there was a discussion of, well, if we're going to do this, we want to have a deed restriction that would be placed on the Durst property to address, how could the land be used that they would gain for us, and how do we try to avoid the problem that we have now where a fence was put on our property. And so we did do that, and as part of that, I can tell you that the mutual deed restriction that is in your packet is something that the Durst family would be okay with. As part of those conversations, they said, well, hey, if you guys are going to restrict our land, we do, the land that the village would be acquiring is immediately adjacent to ours, and we understand that a path would go there, but we would also essentially want to make sure that the village doesn't do something inconsistent with the discussions. And so if you look at the document, starting at the bottom of page 1, top of page 2 is how the Durst land. So if we were to swap land with them and the land that we would give to the Durst would be restricted based on section 1. And if you look at section 1, that is all of that language comes from our conservancy district right now in the village of Waunakee, which is what our land is zoned. And so we kind of worked off that. We wanted, one of the things that the board said is, well, we don't want any buildings. But I think the one thing that we are willing to do is allow them to have a stable, because all of this is related to they want to use it for horses. And so the only building that would be allowed on the property that we would convey to them would be a stable for horses. The rest of it, I would say, is consistent with the uses in the conservancy district. Now, there's also language in here about fencing, because I know another issue that the board was concerned about is stormwater in this area, and making sure that any fencing that would be put up wouldn't in some way, shape, or form negatively impact the flow of water, because we don't want that to happen. And so if you look down at the bottom of page 2, there are additional restrictions that would be placed on the Durst property. And then now I'm just going to read section 2C. It says, notwithstanding section 2B, which allows them to construct a stable for their horse, the Durst may construct a fence on the Durst property so long as the fence does not block or inhibit stormwater or the flow of water to and from 6 Mile Creek. Further, the village and the Durst shall work in good faith together to identify the location of any fence on the Durst property. For avoidance of doubt, one of the reasons for the parties to work together on the fence is to ensure that the fence does not encroach on the village's adjoining property. And so that paragraph is essentially there to address 2 concerns that the village board has raised. 1, making sure that the flow of water is not impacted by any fencing. Also to make sure that no fences are put on our property in the future. So I don't know if you want me to stop here. Those are effectively sections 1 and 2 are the restriction, the restrictions that would be placed on the DURSs. Then we have section 3 that deals with the land that we would acquire, and I would say that sections 4 through 12 are more kind of what I would call general legalese, that you would put in a deed restriction. So I don't know if you want to talk about, if you have any feelings about the restrictions that are placed on their property, if we've gone far enough as it relates to the fencing and the stormwater and making sure that, how they're going to use the property is consistent with what the bill board would want.
All right. Yes, yeah, go ahead.
Do DURS currently have a stable?
I'm not sure if they don't have one on the land on our land. I'm not sure if they have one on their own land.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Do they have a stable within the property that they currently have?
I don't know the answer to that question.
I mean, my understanding is that they do. And sort of the concern that, first of all, the flooding language I think is great, that addressed the concerns that we discussed back in September. I think the one sort of concern that people in the neighborhood have expressed in addition to the flooding is that based on how this is worded, for example, all right, there already is a stable on the property. Well, now, for instance, an additional stable could be constructed, and because of the situation that has unfortunately occurred, the value of that property would be enhanced. So I can support it if we get no buildings on that portion because there already is a stable there. We can do the swap.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, I mean, again, and this is all obviously your decision. I've been told that's a big issue for them. And so I'm not sure to what extent that, I mean, I think what they're looking at is their thought process is, well, at some point in time in the future, they're just going to want this all to be their property. And then if the raising and grazing and riding of horses is allowed, then, they want to be able to put a stable anywhere on the property that they would own. I mean, if it's helpful, I mean, we have language in here that says they can't operate a business. So it's still only going to be for their own personal use. But again, if that's where you're at, that's where you're at. I'm not advocating a different position. I'm just trying to give you the information that my understanding is that.
And I appreciate that. And mainly the concern was, the owner had previously expressed, next 10, 15 years, possibly, selling the property. Obviously, if the owner was going to say on it, or if even we put language on there, after the property is sold, that portion goes away, I would be okay with that.
So it's the issue that the stable, not that the stable would exist, because they could put
No.
a stable on the property they own right now, right? Not on our
Right.
property, but if they wanted a second stable. on
Well,
their
that's
property,
in the
they've got
town. So I mean,
Correct.
I don't want to be able to, my guess is they probably can, but I don't want to be fully commit to that because it's not in our.
So
village.
is it that there is a second stable, or is it that?
It's
that
enhancing the value of the property because of this
They
situation.
can do that on their property right now,
Well,
right?
they could,
Yeah.
but they're
So-
getting this property.
And we could enhance the value of our property in this conveyance by putting in hiking trails if we ever decide to do that. And that's not on the list now. I know that's been controversial in the past. But constructing a kayak launch would enhance the value, I mean, both monetarily, but in terms of usability, putting, what else do we have in there? Fishing pier, an accessible fishing pier also would, we also have the ability to do that. I don't see that so much as an issue myself. Yeah.
I think the reason residents see it as an issue is because what brought us to this
Exactly.
issue in the first place is their encroachment. And I've heard from resident after resident that they feel that the encroachment was wrong and that the family shouldn't be able to benefit from that. And that's a big part of the issue. And I keep hearing it over and over again. They don't want, or people I have talked to do not want the family increasing their wealth because of this, because of how all of this came about. That's basically what I've been hearing.
So if the fence wasn't there, and I'm just trying to understand the issue here, if the fence wasn't there and they weren't encroaching, this would still be an advantageous land swap for us, because even if that fence wasn't there, we cannot access that property, correct? We have to trespass on their property to get to ours.
What I've always, I mean, let me try to answer this. I mean, I don't want to diminish what people are saying to Nyla, because I think I totally understand where they're coming from. the way that I've always looked at this is the only reason why the village is contemplating this is because of the value that the village is getting. And that to me goes back to, I've heard for a long time a desire to put a path in this area. And the fact is we can't acquire the land. This is the only way to do it. And so my response to those people, if they were, like, for example, if they're here to public comment, I totally understand what you're saying. The only reason this is being contemplated is the value to the village, not anything related to the property owner. The other thing I would say is, and this is not the village of Waunakee, this is every municipality in the state of Wisconsin, people are encroaching on our land all over the place. So while I absolutely believe in the principle that you don't want someone to increase, essentially benefit from doing something that they shouldn't have done, that's incidental here from the standpoint of the benefit to the village. If you want to do this, you don't have to. You can, at the end of the day, and we're probably getting to the point where we, need to make that decision, but either we do the deal or the fence comes down. And so it really depends on how you look at it. If you look at it from the perspective of, I don't like what the property owner did here, but while it gave us an opportunity to do something that we otherwise wouldn't have, that's really the focus I think that staff has, but I don't want to diminish the statements that have been made, Nyla, to you, because there's value in that too. Could we do this if the fence wasn't there? Absolutely, we could do it. I don't know of the motivation that the existing property owner would have to do the deal. And the reason I say that is I've been told, and I was not part of these conversations, but I've been told that in the mid 2000s, maybe to the late 2000s, that the village did approach the Durst family about acquiring land from them and paying for it for the path. And the village was told that they weren't interested in that. And so, yes, but is the answer to your question.
Thank you. Jack?
I'm just trying to figure out the fence, the plot of land that we're giving up. Is there some picture that we could see or some?
Yeah, I don't have that. And I forgot, there was one other question that I didn't answer, Kristen, that you had said, because it goes to, my understanding is the land that we have right now, we do not have access to it. Or at least we don't have easy access to it. I'm not sure if we have to cross a railroad track or whatever it is, and I'm not sure if anybody has more information than I do, but I do recall one of the reasons that I was told a number of years back why the village might be interested in this is because it would unlock this path, but also other land that the village owns, because if we get this land, then we're going to have a path to the remnant land that we would be swapping right now.
And is it?
I'm going to try and, we have an exhibit that we had done for prior discussions with the board that I'm going to try and, that's not it. Yeah. I'm going to try and track that down where you're talking. I'll see if
I think you can
Is
see
this
it on
an
access Dane.
So what we've had to do as part of this process is the land that the village owned is subject to restrictions that have been posed by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. So we've had to engage with the DNR as part of this process to make sure that they would be okay with the land swap. And so we got appraisals done of our land and the land that the Dursts own. And when you consider, and I may be misspeaking here, but one of the property's land is valued a little bit greater than the other, and we're making up for that by then the amount of acreage is not one for one. It's when you take into consideration the value for one set of land and the valuation from the other, and then you consider the acreage, then it's a reasonable land swap, and it's a land swap that the DNR has said that they will sign off on.
I think, it riles me up because we've monetized, this is not just this board, but because we've put a value on the ecological services of these lands. They might not be the same size, but what they provide, we're trying to put into monetary concepts for us. And so it is frustrating that, they may financially benefit from this, but there's not a building that we could put up right now that would really serve the village in that capacity. But I just think it's important what Kristen mentioned, like the outdoor recreation value of this land, not just because it's along the river, but the public land that the county owns adjacent across the street and even across the creek right there is just such, I think we have a really important position here to just be able to lay some groundwork that maybe eventually further connectivity will be possible with the other public owners in the area. So sorry, it gets me
Can-
riled up.
Can I
about
describe the
value.
map now that it's up? So the land, I mean, and we're not going through the annexation or detachment process, but the map is helpful from the standpoint of where it says area to be detached. That is land that the village of Waunakee currently owns and would be, if this were to move forward, would then be conveyed to the Durst property. And the land that says area to be annexed, that's land that is currently owned by the Durst family, and that land would be conveyed to the village as part of the land swap.
Chris.
So to me, this is silly stuff that we're talking about. And I'm trying not to get, Aaron got upset. I'm of,
upset. I would like that very clear.
I'm of the opinion that they are giving up a lot. We're giving up land that we can't access and we can't do anything with, and nobody's back there, other than the Durst family. And I want you to think of the house or home or place that you live. If somebody was going to come in and say, we're going to put a path right through your property, and how many of you would say yes, because that's going to increase the value of my property? Nobody. They're going to look at it and say, that's going to decrease the value of my property. And they're giving up one of the most scenic spots that we have to do this for our community, that our community is now going to have access to that area, which we would never get that. We tried 20 years ago. I know Sue was part of that. And it was a pretty firm no that we weren't going to get that to happen. And Westport was working with us. We were working because it was a great connection point for us in our paths. This is an opportunity that maybe we don't have any funding to do it right now. That may be the case. But if we don't take advantage of this time frame, that they made a mistake and put something on our property which opened the door for us to be able to do this. Okay, they don't want to tear down their fence. They absolutely don't want to do that. Does this give them an opportunity to maybe put up a shed? Sure. Who's that going to impact? Nobody. Nobody. Other than if we want to say that we increase their land value, they have to pay to put that building up. So it should entitle them to have more land value if they're going to pay to put it up. But they've also taken a hit now because we're going to have a great path for our community that people are going to be able to walk through. And I would just point to the trail that we put in from the library going into 6 Mile Creek and the residents that were there and how much they were against it. When it was happening, Bill, we were in the meetings together. There was people that weren't real pleased that we were doing that after the fact. That's what's happening here. They're willing to do something that they did not want to do because they're getting something. And in the process, we're getting something. And the DNR has signed off on it. So everybody, that's why this seems silly to me. Everybody's winning for something that they're going to get here, including our residents. Even if we don't put a path, people can still walk down in that area. It's a great area. I know, Sam, you do a lot with the creeks. This is part of our creek system and an unbelievably nice area. Jack, to a point for scaling, on the other side of the creek, it's very slanted uphill. So people can't access really. They're coming down a very steep area. On the other side, where we'd be going down off of Mill Road where potential paths could come in, that's something that still has to be designed, and know that it's not an inexpensive path situation because of how it has to be designed. That's something that is important to understand because it's a wet area.
Right.
So that's why I think we're in a position that we have an opportunity to do something that's good for our residents here. And is it costing us any money? No. Right now, it's not. If we choose to do a path in the future, sure, that would cost us some money. But this particular situation doesn't. And Bill, who mows that area right now? The area to be detached. So is there any maintenance on it?
No, we haven't been able to do anything back there.
And the reason
Because
is?
it's hard to get to. So.
One correction, that the area isn't to be detached.
Well,
It's identified there. I just want to be really.
I'm just pointing it out where it is.
Yep.
Question.
Yeah.
Is that area being pastured?
The grass in that has been cut and harvested.
By who?
The Durst.
I do want to add just one aside. Again, keeping in mind that the area that says area to be detached isn't in this proposal to be detached, it's to be conveyed to the DERS. It remains in the village. My point in mentioning that is that if the owner does put a structure of any sort, stable or what have you, on that property that creates value, that is taxable value to be paid to the village in this potential outcome.
Chris, all right, Joe.
This has been in the works, I think, for the entire time that I've been on the board. You know, am I thrilled to be rewarding this? No, but I think what Chris said really gets to it. We've got a huge opportunity here to get this land if we want to do something with it. And if we don't want to do anything with it, no big deal. But we've got it, if we move forward. And I think that's huge for us.
Right. And Jack, you've had some time to look at it now. Did you have questions or comments?
I'm trying to figure out what kind of fence is on there, you know, because as I drive through there, it looks like just a,
Split rail,
it is split rail?
right? Isn't it? Just a.
It's a corral fence.
Yeah, it's
so
got
a
some
split rail
metal
Corral
in it.
fence.
It's a woven wire.
Okay.
It's type.
So if they decided to take it down, yes, it would cost, but it would be relatively easy to move it back to their property if they did. Yeah. The other question, you brought up the DNR. Is there actually a possibility? Is that more of a wetland back there? Is there actually a possibility where they could build something?
We have not looked at that issue. I mean, there is, I suppose theoretically, there's a possibility that when they get in there, they're going to find out they haven't. We haven't gone into that detail. All that's happened here is initially we had talked about the idea of nothing being built there, and they came back and they said, well, you know, we want to use if we're going to get this land, we want to use it for horses. And so we'd want to have the ability, if we chose to in the future, to build a stable. And that's how we ended up at this point. Again, it's 100% your decision as to, you know, what you want to do here. I mean, I think the entire discussion is got valid points. I don't want to diminish at all. I don't think any, just to be clear, nobody at the village staff level likes the idea that somebody might benefit from having put a fence on village property. Again, the only reason that staff is before you on this issue then is because the change in the law, the state law, and the idea that we know that the villages wish to put a path in this area in the past. That's why we're here.
I guess from my standpoint, I echo Chris's and some of the other comments. You know, we're trying to extend our path system, and we need land to do that. Whether we choose to at this point or not is not up for debate. But you know, it seems like this is equitable between you know, the two parties. And to echo Todd's comment, if they do put a building up, that's increased valuation of the property, which benefits the village. So I would support this.
That does bring up an interesting question. What if they decide to build a stable and they build it right on the line? How does that get dealt with?
You mean over the line?
Yeah, so
Or-
part of the stable is in the village and part of the
That's a good
stable's
point.
in Westport.
Well, I mean, I guess just off the top of my head, I don't believe that you can put buildings on lot lines. And this is, while the land is in the town of Westport, it is in our zoning jurisdiction. And so I think that they would not be able to do that.
Okay.
And there,
Yeah, they'd have to combine the lots really in order to do that anyway, so. Yeah, yeah.
and I'm assuming if it's depending on the type of structure, they would need some sort of erosion permit so we'd
Well, I
at
mean,
least
if
be
they want
notified of
to,
building process.
if they want to go through, okay, now we're, you know, yeah, I mean.
It's not like we won't know that they're
If
putting.
this ultimately happens, they're going to have to go through whatever the standard processes are whenever you want to, I mean, they can't just all of a sudden throw a building up there. They're going to have to go through my belief is likely a site plan process with the Village of Waunakee regarding because it is in the village.
Okay.
Other questions or comments?
I'd just say, I think these are reasonable points here. I think also just, and again, this is more of a question, Chris brought up a shed, which I think is a reasonable point. How would we consider that as an example? Because I measured the distance about 500 feet from the stable to the back of the pasture. What if they wanted to put, I don't know, a small shed for a mower or something like that? Maybe we could be a little more flexible on that front as well, just because you think a stable's a very large building. Yeah, would we get tax revenue for that? Yes, but that may not necessarily be conducive to their sort of hobby operation that they have there. Or if they wanted to store straw in a smaller building or something like that, I don't know.
I think it was brought up, the DNR's involvement, and I believe at one point the DNR was involved because we received part of that conservancy area originally with a grant from that.
Knowles Nelson
So
funding.
the Knowles Nelson. So we had to involve them. We can't just give, our detached land that part of that.
Well, notwithstanding anything that the village board does, that this will not happen unless the DNR signs off on it. What we've been told is that, and it's been a while since we've talked to the DNR, we've been told that they are comfortable with what's being proposed. Now, the land, if this were to happen, the land that the village is going to acquire, and again, I agree with Todd. I mean, we have it phrased area to be annexed, but right now that's not necessarily in the works. It's going to be subject to DNR restrictions. I believe that, the language in section 3 of the deed restriction is going to be consistent with whatever the DNR restrictions the DNR places on it, because this is all related to, open space and wildlife and fishing and things of that nature, which I think is, essentially consistent with the existing restrictions that we have. But if the board approves the mutual deed restriction tonight, then I think what you want to do is you want to approve it conditioned upon the land swap actually occurring. We definitely have other steps, and we will be back before you, because all this was effectively another step. If the board tonight says, nope, we don't want to go ahead with this mutual deed restriction, then that's the signal to staff that we're effectively done with this. And we're not going to do a land swap, and we need to essentially give the Durst family X number of days to remove the fence. If the board approves the deed restriction tonight, we are going to have to start working again with the DNR to figure out exactly what documentation they need from the village. We're going to have to come back to you to probably approve the land swap in more detail based on the title work that the title company is going to want from us. And we're going to have to go to the plan commission just have the plan commission agree with staff's position that the current language in the conservancy district that allows for the, I think it's like the bridle paths would also, it's consistent enough to allow the horse uses that the property owner wants. So if you approve this tonight, and again, if you do approve it, I would suggest that you do it contingent upon the land sale occurring. There's going to be additional steps in that direction. If you don't approve it, then to me, that's the signal of, okay, let's stop with this process and let's just have the fence removed. And again, this is something that is 100% discretionary on your part.
So question, so let's say we approve it, the swap happens, the deed restriction is in place. As long as that remains part of the village, I'm going to assume that our rules on keeping livestock would apply to that property.
Yeah, but subject to what the action that the plan commission is going to take, and subject to the deed restriction, which allows them to have horses on it.
Okay.
If we go through this land swap, will they move the fence?
I don't know what they're going to do with the fence. I mean, their fencing limitations are would be limited to the language in here in the deed restriction. I mean, again, prior board meetings, one of the things the board, there's kind of been this issue of everything that we've been talking about as it relates to the existing property. There's also been the issue of, concerns about flooding. And so that's why we have the language in here regarding the fencing to make sure that if this were to move forward, that nothing could be done that would create greater flooding problems in the area, I think.
Understood. Thank you.
So is the motion then for tonight, to approve the mutual deed restriction contingent on the conveyance of the land?
If that's
Okay.
the direction the board wants to go, yes, that would be the
Conveying
motion.
the land in that motion?
No, that would still have to come back to you because again, there's still more work to be done, I think. I mean, we need to reach back out to the DNR, make sure that they haven't seen this deed restriction. I mean, I think at a staff level, we didn't want to go through that work because there's the possibility that you don't approve the deed restriction. If that happens, then let's not incur that cost and let's go down the other path.
So I would like to, let's see if I get the language right on this. I would like to make a motion to approve the mutual deed restriction that would apply to the lands at the Durst family property located near Woodland and Mill Road intersection, contingent on the conveyance of the land.
Second.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and the only thing, I mean, it also applies, the deed restriction applies to our land too.
Oh.
So, but yeah, I mean, essentially what you're doing is you're approving the mutual deed restriction that's in front of you contingent upon the land swap.
Thank you. Yeah. So moved.
So seconded.
All right. Discussion on the motion? All right. None? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Right, motion carries. Good discussion, everyone. Next item on the list then, back up to item number 2 or page number 2, we have another potential closed session item, discuss and take action on negotiating a cooperative plan between the town of Westport, cities of Madison and Middleton, and the villages of DeForest and Waunakee. And so present this first, read statement second.
Sure, I certainly can provide an update and try to answer any questions that you might have in open session, but I do believe that you will likely want to convene a closed session for this. So it's been a while since this item, and this item is tied to, as you might imagine, the incorporation petition that the town of Westport filed back, I think, in October. And so I think the last time that this item was before you, we were discussing the incorporation petition and some of the legal issues associated with that. And I think that was probably back in February. And as part of those legal discussions, staff and Kristen had also met with a contingent from the town, and we had discussed, potential boundary agreement issues as it pertains to, okay, if Westport is going to incorporate it as a village, right now the petition that would go to the Incorporation Review Board takes the entire town of Westport and makes it a village, including islands within the village of Waunakee. I think that, I think I've said this in open session, my opinion is I think that Westport's gonna have a difficult argument on, at least on the islands. And so for different reasons, Westport has been meeting with Waunakee and with Madison and with Middleton and DeForest to see if there's a way where collectively all communities could come forward as part of this process and essentially support an incorporation petition that is, let's say, revised based on the different boundary agreements. As part of those discussions, then there was also, we have statutes that deal with the incorporation process, and we have statutes that deal with boundary agreements. The boundary agreements that we've done in the past, for example, with Westport and with Springfield, have been under section 660301 of the statutes, and that's what I would call an easier procedural way to get a boundary agreement between municipalities. 660307 talks about cooperative plans, which can include boundary aspects to it, and that's a process that involves the Wisconsin Department of Administration, which also happens to be the Wisconsin department that deals with incorporations. And so as we've been meeting and as the attorneys have been discussing issues, questions were raised of, well, how are we going to get these boundary agreements in front of the Incorporation Review Board? And I think the way that it was determined is that probably the best way to do that is a cooperative plan. Now, you theoretically could have 5 separate cooperative plans between Westport and the different communities, or you can have one. And there's been a desire, I think, expressed by communities, if we can do it in one, let's try to do it in one. But, there's a lot at play between Waunakee and Westport as it would relate to a boundary agreement. And I'm saying boundary agreement, and that's, I mean, it's a cooperative plan, the boundary aspects to it. And so that's kind of where we're at now, is the incorporation petition through the statutory process has been approved by Dane County Circuit Court and can go to the Incorporation Review Board. I think Westport, and I want to put words in their mouths, but I think they're hoping that when that is ultimately goes to the Incorporation Review Board, if possible, they would like to have a cooperative plan that goes at the same time to be able to kind of globally explain this to the Incorporation Review Board. That seems like a reasonable process. But I think what we need to talk about in closed session is, especially now that we have two new board members, is as it relates to the cooperative plan, the terms and conditions that are specific to Westport and Waunakee, and in particular, the terms and conditions as they relate to any boundary discussions. And so that's what the closed session discussion would be on terms and conditions in the cooperative plan as they relate specifically to Waunakee and Westport, and most notably on boundary issues.
All right. So with that, before we go into closed session, or before we contemplate going into closed session, does anyone have any questions or comments? Sam? Jack? Nyla? No. Joe?
Nope.
Chris?
Nope.
Aaron? Nope. All right, with that, I will read the motion or the statement, and then we'll take a motion to go into closed session. The village board may convene in closed session as authorized by Wisconsin statute 19.851E for the purposes of deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. The village board may reconvene in open session and discuss and take action on the subject matter discussed in closed session. So with that, do we have a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
All right, roll call vote.
Nyla Fry,
Yes.
Sam Kaufman,
Yes.
Kristen Rungy,
Yes.
Chris Zellner,
Yes.
Aaron Moran,
Yes.
Joe Zitzelsberger,
Yes.
Jack Heineman.
Yes.
All right, we will go into closed session at 7:32 as soon as the room is clear.